Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. And now we're going to touch on the Brandon Aiyuk news that just broke about like 20 minutes ago. I'll show you guys the segment I had planned, missing the practice on Wednesday. And I guess that's where we'll start. We're going to start in talking about that and how it ultimately led to this decision being made right now. Obviously, starting with everything with this Brandon Aiyuk San Francisco 49ers saga. There was a lot of twists and turns and everything that you thought was going to happen. Maybe being traded to the Browns, maybe being traded to the Patriots at one point, according to the reports that we got. But nothing was ever done because the 49ers either didn't like the offers they were getting or Brandon Aiyuk simply didn't want to be traded to those places. Now, then the Steelers got involved and Brandon Aiyuk reportedly wanted to go there, but again, the 49ers just didn't like their offers. So we were just stuck in this back and forth, issue going over with the 49ers and Brandon Aiyuk. And then also he was starting to hold out, or actually hold in, excuse me, since the start of training camp. And I guess I was right because I was going to bring up the point of what happened on Wednesday as a sort of breaking point with this entire situation. And why I was going to say that was because on Wednesday, Brandon Aiyuk was technically medically cleared to practice for the 49ers. According to the reports, he was dealing with some neck and back soreness throughout this entire time. So he wasn't allowed to get fined. He was holding in, but I was going to call it a hold-in, but technically, he wasn't medically cleared, so they can't fine him for holding in. And that's why another reason Kyle Shanahan and I guess John Lynch also failed to mention this scenario as an official hold-in because they were looking at it more so that, Aiyuk just couldn't practice yet because he wasn't medically cleared. But on Wednesday, he finally got that clearance from the doctors, and he was only showing up to the practices, obviously, but once he got that clearance, Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch talked about it on yesterday, and they said that they expected now for Brandon Aiyuk to participate in practice, not just hang around and watch. They expected him to go out there and practice, and also Mike Garafolo, an NFL insider, also said that there was a little bit of an understanding there between Aiyuk and the 49ers that he would practice because he was cleared now. And at the end of the day, he was contractually obligated to practice, right? He's not like a free agent or anything like that. Obviously, he does have one more year left on his deal, so he can be fined now. But with that being the case, it was a big, a lot of people made a big deal about it, right? Because Shanahan mentioned he was supposed to be there. John Lynch also said that he expects Brandon to practice. And again, to no one's surprise, at least not to me, Brandon Aiyuk didn't show up to the practice at all. And it made it pretty awkward because you have the coach, the general manager saying that, yeah, he should be out here practicing. And then that same day, just hours later at that practice, the wide receiver just isn't there. So it leaves the head coach and, in this case, the general manager, John Lynch, in a bad light and just making them look a little bit, I don't even know what word I'm trying to look for, but it just makes them look bad, obviously, at the end of the day. And John Lynch, this was the first time you sort of noticed, like I mentioned, that breaking point, that turning of the corner, because afterwards he said, at some point you just got to play, referencing Brandon Aiyuk, and just, he has to show up eventually. So this was the first time I sort of noticed a little bit of frustration just wanting to get this over with. And that's why when I planned this segment out, I felt like if Brandon just didn't continue to show up, I didn't think he was going to show up at all in training camp if he didn't get the deal that he wanted. I felt like they were inching now closer to a trade happening, obviously, because it felt like Shanahan and Lynch were at the point that they just wanted to move on from this. And in terms of the fines, Brandon Aiyuk could have been subjected to about $45,769 fines each and every day that he missed a training camp practice. So there was that, and just the fact that they weren't really moving anywhere. I felt like a trade was coming, but of course, Again, I predicted that something would happen, and the complete opposite happened. So now we're at this point where Brandon Aiyuk signs this deal, and some more reports just coming in now. According to ESPN's Adam Schefter, he said, and I quote, "In the end, Brandon Aiyuk accepted the same deal that he has had on the table since August 10th. Per league sources, his hold-in did not alter any part of his new 4-year, $120 million extension. He took the same deal that he had been there for the past 3 weeks. His hold-in is over." And it's just weird on how, unless I'm missing something, just the fact that it didn't really affect it, and just, I guess, in a way, this hold-in of sorts was just really the fact that he wasn't medically cleared in a way, just the way that Adam Schefter reported it in that statement. You know, he's had this offer on the table since August 10th, and just the fact that I guess you took a little bit more time to explore these options and really see if you could get a little bit more. He was doing a good job about it, you know, making a big mess of this entire thing as it did eventually become was a great way to go about it if you really wanted to get traded, but apparently it just seems to be that he just wasn't medically cleared, and yesterday he doesn't show up. Of course, he doesn't get fined. Ultimately, you can assume that they knew that this deal was coming. And in regards to the frustration I kind of sensed with John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan, maybe that point sort of pushed them over the edge a little bit more to get this extension done. And now Brandon Aiyuk is staying with the 49ers for the foreseeable future for the next 5 years. He is on that 5th-year option now, and then his full extension will kick in after this year. And that's fantastic news for the 49ers, obviously, because they're 11 days away from their Week 1 matchup on Monday Night Football against the New York Jets, and having Brandon Aiyuk there, present with this team, is monumentally just a different scenario, right? Because not only are you thinking about that game on Monday with the Jets and that defense you're going to have to play, if Brandon Aiyuk was not there, it was obviously going to be a lot easier for the Jets to game plan around with having guys on that side of the ball like Quincy Williams, CJ Mosley, Sauce Gardner, guys like that. They got a lot of good players on that defense, and not having to worry about Brandon Aiyuk would have made it a lot tougher, and I think the 49ers could have struggled similarly to what we saw last year with the situation with Chris Jones and the Chiefs and him eventually sitting out that first game. It didn't look very good for the Chiefs out there on the field. They end up losing the home opener at home, and then they proceed to extend Chris Jones right after that. And that's where, if Aiyuk was not going to get traded, that's where I felt that this was heading towards. In a scenario where he was going to stay with the 49ers, I felt like that could have really accelerated the process. But now that he is going to be there, it's huge. There is still time for him to get up to speed, and there's nothing really changed offensively or anything like that. So it's not like he has to learn anything new or anything like that. But now, just getting back into football shape, just like CeeDee Lamb, agreeing to his contract a few days ago. Now Brandon is the next wide receiver to get his deal, and now that just leaves Ja'Marr Chase. And how does this contract doesn't really affect that too much, just because Brandon is only getting $30 million per year, and I'm saying that like it's nothing, right? But with what Ja'Marr Chase is ultimately after and how this relates to him, it's just that he is probably aiming a little bit more towards what Justin and CeeDee Lamb got, around $35 million. Actually, I saw a report today by ESPN that said, I don't know how much I believe of this, but it's coming from ESPN. They said that Ja'Marr is shooting for a contract like 160 over the next 4 years or something like that, shooting for $40 million per year, which would just be so just mind-blowing that if it actually does happen, would be just crazy right to start the year, or right before the start of the year, would just throw everything off for me. Honestly, if we just jump from $35 million to $40 million in the course of about a month since Justin Jefferson got his last deal. So that's reportedly what he's shooting for, but I don't know how likely you are to get that for that price with less than a week to go, or less than 2 weeks to go, I should say, to the start of the regular season. But that's the last thing I think we have to worry about now that Aiyuk is going to stay on the 49ers, continuing to keep this Super Bowl window open for the 49ers, at least because a lot of people would have taken a large portion of their stock out of the 49ers if they didn't have Brandon Aiyuk or they traded him. But now they don't have to worry about that. Now they could solely focus on getting back to the Super Bowl and eventually winning it. And not only is this great for their team, obviously talking about a Super Bowl, but also Brock Purdy and his development and continuing to see him take those next steps, because I'm sure Brock was one of those players that really did not want to see Brandon leave. They've built a great relationship. They've had great chemistry, and that could have hurt his chances a little bit if he had a down year without Brandon. Not to say that he's lacking any other weapons, but I think Brandon is definitely the most naturally talented wide receiver that they have on their team. Debo can do a little bit of everything, but Brandon, just talking about natural receiving ability, getting open, great hands, reliable target, I think that is something that Brock really thrived off of. So I'm sure he really didn't want him to leave, to play another great year, and now he's next up for the 49ers to get extended. But now saying that, I'm thinking about Trent Williams, and that's a more urgent topic for the 49ers now that they got Aiyuk. Next is Trent Williams. I should have said then next year they can worry about Brock Purdy. But great news for the 49ers. Great news for Brandon Aiyuk getting paid at the end of the day. $30 million, it's crazy to think that now that's the floor after just last year's offseason and how that was the max, how everything can just change in the matter of the year. But that's where we are now. Brandon Aiyuk gets paid, and now it's just Jamar Chase left. But we will be moving on to some more topics now that I actually have planned. We're going to be talking about Dalvin Cook signing with the Dallas Cowboys to their practice squad. Why it is news, but it didn't really move the needle too much for me, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And then the last segment will be continuing the series on my predictions for each division and how they'll each shape out. We're going to be talking about the NFC South and the Panthers, the Saints, the Bucks, and the Falcons in the last segment of today's show. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.